How's it going? Welcome back to the podcast. So this week I've got Riley Lizotte with me, a good friend of mine, and probably one of the most well-rounded outdoorsmen that I know of. So Riley, welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice for showing up.
Yeah,
holidays.
I know. I've been putting this off for like 3 or 4 months. I think
we've been trying to connect for a while.
Yeah,
and it just hasn't worked out. And Riley's a really good guy. A lot of good stories. And I know Dad wanted to be here today. He was pretty bummed that he was going to miss.
Would have liked to have seen him.
Yeah, so he's en route to Boston right now to spend Christmas with my sister. So I guess Riley and I are going to hold up the fort while he's gone. So Riley, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah,
you're from Van Buren.
From Van Buren,
originally.
Yeah. Similar to kind of your story here, growing up in the county, hunting the big woods, and hardly ever seeing any deer. It seems as we grew up. So, eventually, I didn't really start getting into what I would call like the dedicated hunting until I started after college.
We met in college.
Yeah.
And we kind of hit it off.
You're the first guy I ever met in pharmacy school with the interviews. You were the first guy I saw.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Yeah. We were interviewing the same day, ended up getting accepted, and then went through the whole school together.
So we had a lot in common.
Yeah, we did.
Regarding hunting.
We did, yeah. And it was like, oh man, there's other people in this program that hunt. All right. And this is kind of cool.
And yeah, that's the thing with like academia.
Yeah.
Is not a whole lot of...
there's a lot of, I've learned there's a lot of different people, but it's just not as accepted globally as it is in Aroostook County. So,
no. So anyway, back to...
Yeah, so I, after school, I ended up moving out to South Dakota for a year. I did a little extra training for pharmacy. And out there, like I pretty much went out there to experience, something else, kind of just to see what it was like. And it's wild. You can go all day, you don't see a tree. It's just a totally different style of hunting, and it's much more mobile. And the problem is not necessarily finding animals to go out there, but it's using the terrain, getting in position, finding them on accessible areas. So is a lot different than here. So I kind of rejuvenated my love for the outdoors out there, and then kind of extrapolated that back to here, and how can I use some of those principles and apply them to...
I know some of the pictures that you've sent me over the years, it's hard for me to, I guess, fully grasp without doing it exactly. Because like you said, you sent me pictures of like this year, you shot it was a beautiful mule deer, right?
Yeah, he wasn't a giant. He was a respectable mule deer.
Still, a nice mule deer. And it literally is like a nothingness around this deer. And you shot it with a bow.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, how the heck do you get close enough?
Most of the time you don't.
Because there's nothing.
There's nothing.
It's insane.
It's figuring out what you can get away with, when to move, the sun, which way the wind is going, and using all of those variables. And
so you're using it, obviously terrain features and whatnot.
Yep.
So how close do you get? Like that mule deer this year, how close?
I got to 55 of that deer at one point. Ended up shooting him at 60 yards. That's
still good.
It's a good poke. 55 I got to, but he was with 4 other does, and in that particular situation, the doe, I actually had a doe at about 20 yards for me for most of like 30 minutes as we were sitting there waiting.
No way.
And it was a fawn. It was a young deer, and I think that there's a hierarchy in those little herds that come, and I don't think any of the deer gave that deer any credit. It's as if like your kid's like, oh yeah, look what I saw. And then, you cry wolf so many times, nobody pays attention.
So because I was going to ask, are you worried about like a deer like that blowing your cover?
Absolutely.
Obviously.
Absolutely.
So he saw you or that little one?
Yeah.
It was?
To describe the whole story, we see this deer on this hillside, and as I come around the corner, there's another doe on a closer hillside. I'm out in the open. I just basically have to sit there and wait for those deer to move and just kind of get out of sight. So they eventually, the doe sees the buck and they meet up. And as this is all happening, there's more deer from an adjacent hillside that come down. And so they meet up and they form this herd of 5.
Yeah.
So they go and feed up over the edge, except two of them. There's another doe that's up on the hillside. And so, you know, I waited for some cloud cover just to get rid of my shadow. And there was a kind of cut bank is what we call them, drainage. And you could get in and you could use that, you know, to your advantage. So the sun went away and, you know, I waited, the deer put her head down, started feeding, and I just jumped into this cut bank and used whatever I could and just move when the deer's feeding. You know, I only had one deer to look at, so I would just look at her, see what she's doing.
Yeah.
And eventually I was just closing distance and hoping that, you know, somehow the deer fed back my way.
Okay.
And I got to about 100 yards of her, and I was making a decision. Do I spook this deer and just try to get to the others? Or should I, you know, like, should I just wait it out and hope that they come back?
Yeah.
So I waited it out, and they did end up feeding back my way. So I'm in perfect position at this point. Like, this is the ideal scenario where I'm sitting, I'm in the, like, this little slight rise in this cut bank, and I just have, you know, brush. I mean, basically it's just the top of my eyes that come up when I go and look. And the hardest part is ranging a deer at that point. You know, 10 yards matters a lot in bow hunting at those distances. So
do you use a rangefinder? Or
you have to. Yeah. You know, so I'm in position. These deer start feeding back to me, and I'm like, man, this is going to work out. This is a good, you know, good situation to be in. And this is pretty cool. I mean, I'm 80 yards from this deer, 70, 80 yards, and he's lip curling, you know, and he's not really running the does, but you can tell he's, you know, he's checking him out. And, you know, as he's milling around in, you know, a set of some brush that's out there, and the other does are feeding in brush, and that's when this, you know, fawn started feeding in the brush that's basically right in front of me. And so just kind of picking my moments, waiting for that fawn to put her head down, and then maybe coming up, and then, you know, ranging, trying to get it. There's 5 deer, so you have to kind of pick your spots accordingly. So ended up ranging him a couple times. I had him at 55, and I was going to take that shot, but he was quartering 2.
Okay.
So I couldn't. I was like, man, I got to wait. So I'm sitting there, and I'm tension on the string, waiting for him to turn. And he turned at one point, and I drew and stood up, and that fawn just happened to be right there and spooked off, right?
Yep.
So I just, you know, I let down, just go and hide, and those deer, like, I mean, they didn't know what happened because it was only that fawn that saw me. Yeah. And they just didn't give her credit.
So the little guy doesn't know anything.
Yeah, I think if it's an adult doe, that's a totally different scenario.
Okay.
So I kind of lucked out in that regard. So then, you know, I gave him like 10 minutes to settle down. Then I started getting into the, you know, where are they going to go? And they really hadn't moved that much. They bounded off maybe 5-10 yards and then started feeding back. And so that buck went back to that same spot. And, you know, he was 60 yards at this point, and I just kind of waited for my spot. And then that doe, that little fawn, picked us out again. And then there's another doe that started to pick us out. And so we started to get a little bit nervous. And so I stood up, and just kind of, the buck turned, and I
let him have it.
And it worked out, I guess, you know.
Where'd you hit him?
I hit him, he was actually quartering 2 a little bit, but for 60 yards, I put probably one of the better shots I ever have.
60 yards is a long ways.
I tucked it into the shoulder. I didn't get a ton of penetration, but I got enough in
Did
that.
Did the job.
Had a beautiful blood trail, and he ended up going up and over the other hillside. So he started to go up, and I was like, oh, man, you know, like that's...
Here we go.
Yeah, it's never a good thing when they go up, right? So I kind of, I just ran up to the top just to see, because, I mean, you can see forever. Yeah. So instead of tracking a blood trail, just try to cut it off a little bit.
Yeah.
And he never came up out the other end.
No kidding.
So he was still, we saw him, and I was going to make another stalk. And as I was stalking in on him, he expired at that point. But yeah.
When you sent me that picture, that was the first thing. I love the picture because it just speaks so loudly to what the hunting is like. I'm looking at that picture, and the first thing, it's a head scratcher. I'm like, it's like a wide open.
Yeah, it is.
Just you see forever. I'm like, how the heck did he shoot this thing here?
It's they have to be in the right position. You have to have
a lot of things have to go.
There's a lot of things that have to fall into place. Yeah.
So that was this year's mule deer, right?
Yep.
So I guess to back up a little bit, when we first met.
Yep.
Back in school, that was what, 2009, 2008.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah.
What was your style of hunting then? Because I'm sure it's changed a lot, right?
It's changed a lot. Yeah. Back then I was had my spots, and those are the spots that I went to, and just hope that something showed up that day.
Were you bow hunting?
I was bow hunting. I really wasn't I wouldn't call myself a hardcore bow hunter at that point. I bow hunted. 2008 was about the time I got my first legit bow.
What was it for a bow?
It was a Bowtech Tomcat. It was like a lower tier model. It was a good bow, but I ended up, I'd always enjoyed bow hunting, you know, just to be 10, 30, you know, 10, 20, 30 yards from something. But it's frustrating. You know, I went through a time of target panic, you know, and anybody who bow hunts usually goes through this at some point in time.
What's that?
Target panic is, you know, obviously with bow hunting, you have to hold on target, you know, and there's always movement. It's not like a rifle where you have a rest and you can get solid. Target panic is when you just can't release when your pin is on the area that you're trying to shoot at. Yeah. So I would always hold like 6 inches low, and I could just never, it was like my arm didn't go up. You know, I could hold rock solid underneath that, but I could just never put it on target and, you know, execute a good release. I struggled with that for a long time.
All right.
And you know, it's debate, like, is this really for me? You know, I don't feel confident being able to put ethical shots on things. And so after residency, when I moved back, I started getting a big boy job, and I started making money. I bought a new bow, and it's still the bow I use today.
So what does it use now?
I use a Bowtech Experience.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got that back in 2016.
Okay.
Love the bow, but it held a little bit better for me. And I was able, it shoots a little bit quicker. I mean, there's a lot of slight variables, but I just felt more confident in it. And I started pushing my comfort levels to, you know, I never shot 30, 40 yards accurately with, you know, the Tomcat. And I started pushing to 30, 40, 50 yards. And then I'm like, man, I'm hitting stuff.
Yep.
After you shoot at 50 yards, 30's easy. Yeah, I mean, the target's huge. Yeah. But when you go from 10 to 30, it's all about perception.
Yeah.
And a lot of those cases. So just getting some of the right equipment, a different sight, a smaller, you know, sight pin on it versus like the stock kind of true glow stuff that you might get. Yep. All of those things matter when you're shooting at a target that, you know, you don't have the magnification that you do with a rifle scope or something like that.
All right. So you've shot quite a few animals now with your bow.
Yeah. I mean, if I could bow hunt all the time, I would never use a rifle again.
Are you serious?
I would.
You would give up rifle hunting?
I would give up rifle hunting. Yeah.
No way.
It's kind of fun. To me, it's
well, I guess we're not friends anymore.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I'm certainly not, you know, foo-fooing it or anything like that. But
you're like one of those fly fishermen now.
I'm kind of, it's kind of like that. Yeah. I mean, I still rifle hunt. I went out this year. I didn't see anything with it. So it's certainly not like it's easy.
Yeah.
But you know, you can go to an area that you've never been at and just stumble upon a deer at 200 yards and knock it down. Can't do that.
Not doing that with the bow.
You can't do that bow hunting.
So what was your first animal with a bow?
My first animal with a bow was it was a little doe.
Was it in Maine?
It was in Maine.
Right.
Yeah, it was an expanded archery buck that on a trip I used to take with my dad every year.
Okay.
And I missed so many deer through the years doing that, and I ended up hitting this deer. And honestly, I just got lucky. I didn't put a good shot on it. Ended up hitting an area that was just happened to be a fatal area.
Yeah.
And you know, felt awful about it, but I mean, it happens.
It does happen.
So that was my first archery buck.
And anyone that gives you crap about it is full of crap, because it happens to everyone.
It does. I mean, you try to minimize, obviously, but
you're right.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about bow hunting, you've got kind of an interesting stand setup that you use.
Yeah.
That I can remember you sending me pictures of that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
Well, explain that a little bit.
So I use it's a saddle. It's kind of become popular. Tethered kind of brought it up, but there's a lot of Latitude has some. Hawk even has some. There's a lot of companies that are making it now. But it's, I mean, I guess it's a harness that goes around your hips.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different styles. I use a setup of mobile sticks.
Okay.
And I use those to set up. Some people have, you know, screw-in steps. Some people, there's one sticking, which is another method. There's all kinds of, whatever you want to use to get up the tree.
Yeah.
And then instead of a tree stand, I use a it's called a platform, and it's probably roughly about the size of the seat on a normal tree stand.
Okay.
And so you basically stand up with this harness. So you have a rope, that safety rope, and then you tether in to the lineman's belt. So you're connected usually with some sort of clip, or people use like prusik knots to hook in.
Okay. Yeah.
Or whatever you want to use. And so you can lengthen and shorten the tether length. So I can sit down in the saddle.
No kidding. Okay.
So I've got my feet on the platform, my knees against the tree, and I'm basically just in a sitting motion with my weight being carried by the harness.
So you can take the weight off your legs.
You can take the weight. I can lean, so I'll just, straight leg it and just lean, and the harness is just holding my weight there.
Okay.
And you can also just stand on the platform, shorten it up, and then you can be a little bit more upright. So it's a little bit different because you're facing the tree instead of facing away from the tree on a stand.
Yeah.
But you have a lot more mobility out of it, I find, than in a tree stand. It's dead silent. I wrap all of mine in some tape, so there's no metal parts in any of my system.
No kidding. All right.
So like I don't have buckles on my steps. I use daisy chain, am steel, I guess ropes.
Okay.
Is what. So you just loop it around the tree, and there's no buckles. There's no nothing. Some people do that for weight. I don't really care about weight. It's not that big a deal, but it's just the sound.
No, you're in pretty good shape.
I try to.
So could that setup work for rifle hunting?
You could. Yeah, some people do it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you use it, we were just talking about it a little while ago, use it mainly, obviously it's kind of a minimalist setup.
It's very minimalist, yeah.
And you were having issues with other people?
Yeah, so I had a couple dedicated stand setups in some areas. I don't like it for a couple of reasons. One is it brings attraction for other people who are investigating in the area. It potentially brings competition. If you have a good spot and somebody sees a stand,
stand sitting there.
Somebody's here for a reason, right? So I try to kind of be a little bit more incognito for those reasons. But two is you show up and somebody decides they don't want you hunting there. They took my sticks, the first set of sticks that I had. I usually have 3 going up the tree. So they took my first one, so I can't reach the second one. And then they cut my bow rope. I have a nice, like bow rope tether. You pull up your bow, and then you show up, and your system's all jacked up. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So luckily for me, that day I was going to pick it up at the end of the year, and I show up, and I can't even pick it up. So I got to head out, come back in, bring another stick so I can get up and take all the stuff out.
You must have been ticked.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not using very expensive stands and all that stuff specifically for those reasons. But, had I been going in the middle, if you're 4 o'clock in the morning, going in, 30 minutes before legal time to set up. You don't want
to deal with that stuff.
I mean, that's, and
you would never do that to someone else.
No, I try to respect boundaries, but there's some in every crowd. So
there is.
That was some incentive, and that's all. I mean, I've got 3 kids. I work a couple jobs. My time is valuable. I don't have time to go and pick up sets in 4 or 5 different areas. It takes a whole day or 2 just to do it. So
limited time, and want to spend that time hunting instead of setting up and tearing down.
Yep.
Well, since we were talking about being in good shape and weight's not an issue for you, come to find out you're a closet runner.
Not really.
I didn't know. So you did a triathlon recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did my first one last year. Yeah.
How'd that turn out?
It was good. I mean, it went better than I thought it would for my first one. I played sports in high school. I played center, mid in soccer. Yeah. So I run, but I never
That's a different beast.
It's the hamster effect. You put a ball, I can run all day chasing it like a hamster does, but just to run, it was kind of a different.
It's between the ears.
It's between the ears, and I'm very competitive. Yeah. And so for me, I always need something to beat. Yeah. And it's hard to start something when you don't have a baseline to beat. Yeah. Or anything like that. So, my wife is actually the one. She started road biking last year, and I said, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I want no part of it. Right? And so she started biking. She ends up doing this race in Bangor that comes up. Yeah. And I use the term race loosely here because it's really more like a ride. Yeah. But, it's a race. It's timed and all that. Fantastic event. We had a great time. And all of a sudden I find myself at the end of that year going, I want to do this.
Do it.
I want to do this. So I bought a bike off Craigslist, started riding it for a couple months. I was like, man, this is not bad at all.
No kidding.
And then this spring, I kind of started, or last spring, I should say, I started picking it up and kind of going with it. And I was like, man, I wonder what I could do with this. And then ended up getting the idea. I said, yeah, let's try a half Ironman and try that. So swimming is awful.
So your first one was an Ironman.
My first one was a half Ironman. There's a big difference. Yeah. There's a big difference.
Still. We'll just go with Ironman.
Yeah. I mean, technically, it was an Ironman event, but it was not the full Ironman that you see. So,
all right.
But yeah, I mean, that's keeps me in shape doing it. It's something else I can do. I can do it with M.
Yep.
Ayla, we bought Ayla a bike. I think it's just a good.
See, that's why you'd be a good deer tracker.
I could track. Obviously, I don't know the art. You know what I mean? Like there's subtle tales that you know, and that you know that I wouldn't. I would obviously have to pick it up.
Man,
I've wanted to do it.
You came up once with us.
I came up. That was the year I shot that. I shot the biggest buck I shot, and I just tagged along with you, trying to drag one out.
We should have shot a buck that day too.
We came close.
We were into some deer.
Close. Yeah.
That's what happens when you hesitate for a second.
Yeah,
we were into a lot of deer. And there was a buck chasing a doe. Because remember we were tracking some deer, and I see the back end of a deer going to a blowdown.
Yep.
And we made our way up there, and we jumped 2 deer off to the left.
Yeah.
And then we came into, it was just a barnyard of tracks.
It was.
There's deer all through there.
That's where they were hanging out, yeah.
And we kind of ended up coming backtracking to where we'd come from. And we were standing there, remember?
Yeah.
Here comes 2 deer. Obviously, it was a buck and a doe.
Yeah.
And the doe comes out across the little opening, and the buck was right behind her. And I just hesitated for a second, thinking, man, I'm making sure it's a buck, because there was a lot of deer in there.
Yeah.
And he was grunting and going it the whole way.
Yeah, that's true. I remember that.
Whole way down.
But it was thick in there. I remember there was a lot of beach coming up in that. It was a thick area.
Yeah. That was a good day. I think that was the year we had a lot of snow.
A lot more than we do this year.
But I think it was one of those falls that we'd gotten snow early in October.
Yeah.
It was hard going. We went all day. I think it was like 18 inches of snow.
There was, probably. I would say something like that.
Because going in, it was just 2 tracks in the road. And if you get off the road, you were stuck.
Yeah.
And we went all day.
We were there all day. Yeah. Well, you found a set of tracks right first thing in the morning, and we went pretty much right till dark. So
and when we get into them, but
yeah,
I think you'd have a lot of fun.
Yeah,
different than bow hunting.
Yeah,
that's a different.
I've wanted to
different beast.
I've wanted to do it, but.
So what was your first Maine buck?
First Maine buck was actually up north. It was a little forkhorn. Okay. I shot in one of those dedicated setups that
up around Van Buren. North? Yeah.
Okay. Up around in that area. My dad and I got permission to hunt this old potato field that had basically turned into clover.
Yep.
And deer were hitting it with somewhat regularity, as regular as you can up here. And that day, I overslept my alarm. I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
And it was Veterans Day. And I was like, man, I'm going to go out tomorrow. We had a nice little cabin. I'll sit most of the day. And I think I woke up at like 8:30, 9 o'clock. You know? I was like, I almost didn't go. And I said, well, whatever, I'm just going to go. And I got there maybe, 9:30, set up. And about 11 o'clock, I see a deer come out in the field.
No kidding.
And it was just this little dinky buck. And I just remember, like, I had never had an opportunity on a buck. I was 16 at this point, and in 6 years of hunting, I'd never seen or had a chance. And I just remember I bowed down. I said, thank you, Lord, for giving me this chance. And I got back up and I ended up just, shooting this deer.
Oh, you did that before you shot it?
I did that before I shot. I needed to calm myself down. You know what I mean? I was shaking like a leaf,
If you don't see a lot of deer, I think people from Maine can relate to that.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, we don't have a huge population of deer. So you spend deer seasons, like if you get one opportunity, that's a good
it's
good
not
season.
It's not a common trait.
You're
with
not
all the
seeing
other
a
deer
lot of
states.
Deer. And I know the guys at our deer camp would say the same thing when I was a kid. Like, even being experienced as they were, because they were a lot older, And even when they would see a buck, sometimes it almost doesn't register. You spend so many days not seeing a deer. And I can remember them saying, Dale, one of the guys in particular, he would say, like, you'd see a buck and be like, that doesn't belong there. Yeah. Like, you just have this, I don't know, it's just.
Yeah, am I hallucinating?
Yeah, so especially if you're a stand hunter, which a lot of people in eastern Aroostook County are, they spend, so much time looking at a spot and not seeing anything. And then you see something there and it's like, that doesn't look right. That doesn't belong there.
What is that?
Yeah, it's hard
I didn't know we had those.
Yeah. People from other parts of the country that, they probably see
I mean,
bucks on a daily basis.
I see more deer in one day of hunting out west than I do in 3 years of hunting out here. It's just the terrain and the numbers of deer.
Now, I remember you had an interesting story of one, I think it was a mule deer you shot that you packed out.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably quite a few.
All of them I've done that with. Yeah.
There was one that was quite a ways, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was probably in Nevada. I went a couple of years ago. That was a big one for me. That was a big confidence boost.
What was that hunt like?
That was an absolute slog. It was awful. It was like one of the worst weeks of my life. And it's one of those things that I've realized that's kind of what hunting is a lot of the time. You see the glamour shots, you see all these, like all these high points, but you never ever see the lows that people go through with hunting, right? Like you're talking about, you don't see a deer all year. Nobody ever brags about that on social media, right? I'm such a good hunter, I didn't see a deer all year. Yeah. It happens. It just wrong place, wrong time. But
talk to Dad. He's had a couple dry seasons,
I've been there.
And you sit there and the wheels spin,
like, what am I doing wrong? Exactly. Sometimes it's just you just got the bad luck that year. But no, this hunt, Nevada is an interesting structure. They give out very few tags, so the quality of hunts is typically higher because you have less competition.
So did you have to apply?
Yeah, you got to apply. Okay. Yeah, so I had 6 years of preference points for this hunt.
Okay.
And I have a buddy that lives out in Idaho, and he's a diehard. I've learned a lot hunting with him. So I met him when I was in South Dakota doing residency out there. So we kept connected, and I said, hey, I have points in Nevada. Do you have some? He said, yeah. Turns out we had about the similar amount of points. Okay. So we said, whenever you want to do it. And 2021 was that year. So we ended up drawing a tag. It's early season tag, so it's velvet muleys. Yeah. Always wanted a velvet muley, I think they're cool. So, he's like, when do you want to go? And so, well, let's go right when the season opens, right? So it ends up, I think it was August 10 was the opener, right? So
that is pretty early.
Yeah. I mean, August 10 in Nevada.
That's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot. But of course, these are, we were hunting, it's a mountain hunt, right? So we start looking at the weather forecast, and it's like, for comparison, normal highs in those areas are like 80 degrees, 80, 85.
In August?
In August.
Okay.
Yeah, in those mountain areas. Yep. But early morning, late evening, it gets cold. I mean, it's like 30 degrees. The swing in temperatures is like unbelievable. Swing. Yeah. Like in the mornings, you're wearing everything that you have, and by the end of the day, you're stripped down basically naked because it's so hot, right? Yep. So this hunt, we were there for 9 days. And for the first 8 days of it, the highs did not get below 95.
Oh my God.
It was like the mornings were cold. It was 50 degrees. So you'd climb up high, you'd glass, but you didn't get a lot of deer activity because instead of 30 degrees, it's 50 degrees in the morning. So
it's hard to get motivated to hunt.
It's hard to get motivated to hunt. And I'm all for doing stupid things. And we did a couple stupid things doing that, but it's like you couldn't carry enough water in the course of a day.
Okay, yeah.
To survive out there. I was carrying, I'd get up first morning, I would chug a liter of water. I'd have a 2-liter bladder. I'd have another liter bottle, and I would bring food and a kill kit that has, the stuff to pack it out and my pack, and that's it. I'm not carrying that much, but by 2:00 in the afternoon, we're like, we got to get out of here. We're running out of water, and they don't have water sources everywhere to pump from somewhere. It was just a different, and you're sweating. For 8 days, that's basically what we did. We would get up, glass, not see a whole lot of deer, do some, recon mission where we would just climb to the top and just try to find something to go after.
Try to make something happen.
And one morning, we kind of did that. We hunted this area. We saw some deer. Could just never get a situation to work out. So we said, let's just move. You know, I mean, this is kind of where I get the mobility aspect of where I hunt now. Let's just move. Let's just hike in somewhere else and let's do it. So we hike in one day in the dark, and of course it was Aaron's idea, my buddy. I'm cursing him as we're going up. So I'm like, man, what is this guy doing? You know, it's climbing mountains. It's like 3 hours before sunrise. You're climbing 4 miles in, climbing 2,000 vertical to get to the top, and you get there. And then we come around the corner and there's $4 bucks. And we push one off, and Paul, this mule deer, one of them was just this biggest mule deer I've ever seen.
No kidding.
I'd probably put him, 180, 190 class if I had to guess. Just in all full velvet, giant. This was, by the time we found him, it was, we're pushing lunchtime and whatever. So we're looking, we ended up bumping him. And he ended up kind of going back towards the trucks.
Okay.
And so, we said, well, if he's going towards the trucks, we're going to go there anyway. So we kept going after him. And, Aaron just bounds off this mountain, basically running after this thing. I'm like, what's this guy doing?
What's wrong with him?
So I'm going to follow, right? So we end up going, well, it's probably one of the craziest things I've seen. This giant mule deer, would just bed down on the backside of the next ridge.
No kidding.
Right, so you're just basically going up and down ridges, and he would just bed on the other side. And so you'd come around, and the first couple of times, we're not expecting that, right? We're just trying to cover ground, and you bump him, and he goes up over the next one. And we did that twice, and we're like, what is going on? And you could see him go up the other side, and you can just see he's walking, his tongue is out.
No way.
I was like, this was just a fat grandpa, out of shape deer, really. Yeah. And he had 2 younger deer that were just like kids that are just running around doing everything. And they were kind of his lookouts. We had a couple really close calls with that deer, but they were just so amped up from, us bumping him. And we really didn't play the situation right. We were in Hail Mary mode at that point. Yeah. But we chased those deer for most of the day. It was just the coolest thing to just see this deer.
Crow.
I mean, we were basically, chasing down a deer. And those small deer, if they would have given up on that buck and taken off, I think we would have killed that deer.
No kidding.
But those deer were just his lookout, so you could just never get close. One would look one way, one would look the other way, and you could just never...
Kept busting you.
Just kept busting us, yeah.
So did you shoot a deer on that trip?
I did. So that area, we went out and... believe it or not, this was after 7 days. This was the 6th or 7th day. We hadn't taken showers yet, so we find this little.
Been a nice
smell
back at camp.
It was awful, yeah. So we end up finding a campground. We rented a site for the night just to take a shower, and then we went back and we packed in that night to this area, and it was the second to last day. The last day we just had the morning before we had to get out of there. And so we packed in, and we went in a different way, and we followed this drainage, and it was just, you're side hilling with, you got your tent, your sleeping bag, and all that stuff. It was miserable. So, and it's hot too, right? So we set up, all is good. We find some deer that night, didn't really have a play on them, but the next day it's supposed to be a little bit cooler, and it's the last full day. So Aaron, he says, all right, let's just split up. You go this way, I'll go this way, and we'll double our chances again.
When you say cooler,
it was a high of 85.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So a little bit more normal, but that day there was actually an adjacent fire, so there was some smoke cover, and so it blocked the sun, so it made it cloudier and it made it feel colder than it actually was. So it was actually really good stalking conditions because I didn't have a sun, I had the wind, I had some cover, so it worked out. So that morning he goes his way, I go my way. And I glassed for an hour and a half up on this hillside. I didn't see anything. I'm like, man, what a waste of the best day of the trip. Yeah, undoubtedly the best day of the trip. And I'm thinking about giving it up. Maybe I should climb another hillside. And then boom, there I see them. They're much lower than I thought that they'd be. And there's 6 of them. So I watch them kind of mosey around, and they bed. And I start making a move, and then they get up. And so I just want to make sure I know where they're bedded. Right. So eventually they get in a spot, and I said, I think I can find them. So I, go down this hillside, go up the next, and I start working my way in and decide that, the initial route that I went on wasn't going to work. So I back up, go around another way. And, I remember coming, and I'm just seeing, and it's this rock ledge, and there's it kind of looked like a castle, like the entrance to a castle.
Yeah.
Like so it was a really good vantage point for me to mark visually because there's nothing else that looked like it.
Yep.
So I knew those deer were right there. So as I come around the corner, there's 6 deer all bedded in the shadows along this ledge.
No kidding.
It was just the coolest thing to be 200 yards just looking, and you're just seeing these deer lined up there. So I was able to use the rocks and hide and end up climbing up so that the top, it's like, it kind of like bowed down into a bowl. So I climbed to the top of the one that's closer to me. And I was actually 55 yards from a decent buck. And I get the full draw, and it's a little bit windy, and I just didn't feel good about the shot. And I started looking around, and I was like, man, I think I can get closer.
Okay.
And I really pushed my issue because the wind wasn't really great. It was a little bit swirly, and when those, you know, as it goes around those rocky points, you never exactly know how that's going to swirl. But I said, I mean, it's the last day I'm going to try to make it happen. Yeah. And so in hindsight, I probably should have taken that shot. I didn't. I guess it worked out. But so I climb around this ledge, and I end up getting like 40 yards from these deer.
Okay.
And I'm like, and so I just kneel down. I can't see them, but I know they're just on the other side of this rock.
Yeah.
And so I got an arrow. I'm on my knees. I'm knocked. I'm ready. And then I'm going to sit here for as long as it takes. I'm not going to spook them. It took 2 minutes, Paul, and the wind swirled. And it went up in that drainage. And then, so they all get up and they bounce out right in front of me. And they're like 50 or so yards or so. And so I draw back and I'm looking, and there's just like 6 deer huddled together, you know, and there's antlers everywhere. And I'm trying to pick, you know, there's a couple smaller bucks and there's a couple bigger bucks. So I pick one. I was like, this is a good buck. I don't know if it's the biggest one. I don't have time to evaluate.
Yeah.
So I, you know, end up shooting this buck, and I missed.
Season crow.
I missed. It went low. I don't know if maybe I didn't have a chance to range him, but I had ranged everything beforehand. I don't know if it's that or I just, you know, mooched the shot.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, at least I got my chance, right? Well, they end up they just stayed there. They didn't really know what was up. I had good cover where I was, so I, you know, slowly knock another arrow and, you know, draw back. I was able to get away with it all. And there's one, the closest one to me he looked like a decent buck at that point in time. So I drew back and I put a much better shot on that one. I hit him mid-body, you know, tunneled up and he takes off. And he goes up, and they all start going up, and then he goes down. And I was like, man, this is my buck. This is my buck. And so when it was all done, he ended up being about 300 yards from camp.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I just made a big circle around to get to where he was. So I found him. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. So I said, well, I'll just run back to camp and see if Aaron's back, you know, and see what he's up to. Yeah. I get back to camp, and he's sitting there with a big mule deer in his pack.
That's a good day.
I said, and he said, yeah, I was just about ready to go to the truck to drop this off. And he had wrote a message in the rocks, you know, like to truck, you know, with a bloody arrow. So I knew what was up. And I said, well, you want to come help me? So so he drops his pack. We go, we get my deer, pack it all up. And then we packed it out that night. We ended up getting to the truck. I think I had like a Cliff Bar all day. I get to the truck at like 10 o'clock at night. It's pitch black. You know, I probably, you know, it's like a 12-mile day, you know.
Holy smokes.
Side hilling with a full pack on the way out.
So how far was the pack out with the deer?
About 4 miles.
That was 4 miles.
Yeah, which I've packed out deer 4 miles. If you're on flat terrain, I mean, it's not fun, but it's easy. But this was just like this side hilling, this draw and drainage. It was probably better that it was dark because it was not a whole lot of fun to see what was coming up next. You know what I mean? You're bushwhacking through alders because it's in this river bottom and crossing back and forth. So we end up, you know, packing that out and then packed back in that night because we had to get our tent.
Get your gear.
And stuff like that. So
that's insane. Those make good stories.
Yeah, it was.
Those are good. Or make good experiences, good memories.
It was like I wouldn't want a hunt. I mean, like as awful as that was, it was just the absolute perfect hunt to stick with it for 8 or, you know, I think it was 8 or 9 days, whatever it ended up being. Just miserable, hot.
Yeah.
It was awful. So, you know, and that speaks credits to having a good dedicated hunting partner too. Yeah. Because at any point, if he would have said, listen, I'm out, I'm done with this,
you're right.
I probably wouldn't have been far behind him and said, you're right, this sucks.
Yeah. It makes it easy to throw in the hat.
Yeah.
Someone else does.
Yeah. And, he said the same. He's like, dude, I wouldn't have shot that deer without you.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have shot my deer
Was
him.
that your last day of the hunt?
That was the second to last day.
Day.
So, it was a nice end because, of course, I have to fly back. So I had a chance to get the meat all frozen, kind of sectioned off, pack my stuff.
How do you get the meat back?
On the plane.
No kidding.
Yeah. Check bag. Yep.
No
yeah.
kidding.
Buy a cooler.
Yeah.
I always bring a scale with
Okay.
me, some handheld scale,
Yep.
so I know how much it weighs. But put the meat, 50 pounds, and if you can, the first, it depends which airline you fly. The first two aren't usually too bad. The third one, it starts to get expensive.
Okay.
So, I left some with Aaron since he's out there. He uses it. So,
all right.
For me to spend $150 to bring back 10, 20 extra pounds of meat,
Yeah.
it's not really worth it.
Nope.
But
no, it wouldn't make sense.
when he'll use it just all the same. So that's.
There was a story, and I might be mistaken, but wasn't there a hunt you did? I think it was with a rifle that it was quite a pack out. You were with a buddy.
Yeah, that might be, that's probably South Dakota.
For some reason I was thinking like 8 miles.
No,
No?
we weren't in quite that deep. I've actually only shot one animal out west with a rifle. And
what was that?
that was the first mule deer I ever shot in South Dakota. Yeah. I actually drove out there with a buddy and we bow hunted, and this is like the school of like, you have no idea what you're doing and you're figuring it out. This was the trip that was figuring it out.
Okay.
It was just mistake after mistake, dedicating too much time to areas that don't have deer.
Well, that's how you learn.
It was just like, man, why can we not get on deer? And ever since then, I've kind of put pieces together, and so I can usually get on deer.
Yeah.
But this trip, it was a struggle fest. But
Okay.
there's one spot, actually, when I lived out there, I had shot a whitetail buck out of this spot. It was the only tag I could get as a non-resident, kind of last minute like I was that year. So I was familiar with the area at that point in time, and it's a big public area with walk-in. I just said, hey, let's just go for a walk, and see what happens. So, we bow hunted it. We saw some deer. We never really had a chance over there, but it was nice to see deer.
Yeah.
So opening day of rifle season, we got up at 2. We stayed at a buddy's house in Rapid, drove over to the unit, hiked in, 4 miles in the dark. It's not difficult hiking in South Dakota, and there's people everywhere.
Is there?
There's a lot of people. Of course, there's probably a lot of people that hunt in Maine that you just don't see because you can't see for 200-300 yards sometimes. You can see there's somebody on every hillside.
No kidding.
That
would be so discouraging.
It was very discouraging, right? So we were, and then you can hear shots going off, and you're, man, how is there a deer that's going to be in here?
Yeah.
Right. And so we set up in the spot that we had seen deer working through, and a nice 4-point comes out mid-morning. I don't know if he got bumped or, because obviously there's people walking everywhere too. So it stirs things up. And we weren't set up in a good spot. And again, this is one of those learning curve things that I was not in the spot that I needed to be.
Okay.
And so we had a shot. We had I think probably 300-yard shot that my buddy took, and he missed.
Okay.
So we went over, checked it. There's no blood. Come back over to the hillside that we were originally on, but shifted farther down for better shooting angles. And he peeked up over the top on the other side, and there was a smaller buck with a bunch of does. He ended up shooting that one. So we packed that one out. It was just 4 miles back to the truck. Easy walk, but you're still walking it, right?
Are.
It's a deer split between
weight.
two. Yeah, it's a deer split between two, so it wasn't that bad. Grabbed the bite to eat, went back in. On the way in, I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to go. You know what I mean? We just shot a deer here. There's people over there.
Yeah.
So I end up seeing a doe in this bottom. Sounds good. Let's set up here for the night. I've got 2 hours left. I know that there's deer in the area. I know that there's a deer here.
So you guys will go in and hunt and then camp out?
We not on this trip.
Okay.
We didn't. We actually, really wasn't sure what my plan was going to be on this one.
Okay.
We were probably going to end up sleeping in the truck that night.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were excited because we were like, hey, we're going to have back straps.
Yeah.
We're going to have back straps for supper. We'll just, eat it in the truck, and we'll be out first thing tomorrow anyway. Right. Yeah. So 7 minutes before light ends that night, I look up and there's a buck that comes out on the hillside across from us. Right.
Jeez.
It's 200 yards.
Yeah.
I said, dude, there's a buck there. Can you confirm? He says, yep, there's antlers. It's a good buck. I dropped him right there. Luckily I made a good shot because it wouldn't have been fun to
try to find it.
I mean, by the time I got to him, it's dark, so I don't know where exactly he is on the hillside to be looking for blood. So dropped him right there. He ended up he was a nice muley. So yeah, we.
Did you pack that one out all by yourself?
Yeah.
Is that the one? I remember a story where your buddy was like, "Oh, You're like, no, this is my.
I was like, I have to do this one for me, you know. So I packed out. I was actually kind of pissed because I couldn't pack out. We didn't debone it. We quartered it and took the bones, but I couldn't fit one of the hindquarters in it. You know, I've never shot a 250-pound deer like you have in Maine, but this deer was all of 250 pounds.
It was a big deer.
I've shot 200-pound deer in Maine.
Yeah.
This deer he was a tank.
No kidding.
He was a tank. I couldn't fit.
No kidding.
So I was like, all right, you got to bring this thing. I'll take the rest.
Yeah.
And so I took it out. It was
awesome.
probably like a 16-mile day packing, 2 deer out.
That's awesome.
I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of people doing it. It's not like I'm doing stuff that nobody does, but there's a level of effort and reward that you kind of get out west that sometimes you don't get here.
We've talked about that. Like, I've shot deer that I didn't really do anything to shoot it.
Yeah.
Like it was just a lucky, and you don't feel there's something missing.
Yeah.
You feel almost, I don't want to say guilty, but it definitely doesn't feel like the times that you kind of put a plan together and bust your butt.
It works
kind of
out.
Everything comes together.
Yeah.
And it happens and you're like, man, that was a really good hunt. I guess that's part of hunting.
It doesn't happen often, but man, it's nice when it does.
It's not just killing.
Yep.
If it was just killing, then pulling the trigger would be, I guess, the end all be all. But it's hunting. When you did your residency out west, was that your whole reason for doing that was because you wanted to go out there hunting?
It was
and get that.
It wasn't entirely. I mean, it played a role.
Yeah.
I looked at my wife at the time, and I was just like, "You want to do this? I mean, like, this is a year, no commitment.
Yeah.
We don't have to stay. Obviously, our plan was to come back.
Yeah.
Is this? Do you want to do it?" She's like, "Yeah, let's try it." So I interviewed out there. Of course, I had daughter. I had Ayla in pharmacy school.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the greatest of residency accolades to support. I wasn't going to go to like the Ohio State or any of those places. So, the Midwest was a kind of happy medium for me where I could get the experience but not have the, I guess, competition.
Yeah.
And I went there, interviewed at a couple of places, and the people in South Dakota were just fantastic.
Really?
I mean, I honestly could not have asked for a better
Yeah, it sounds like you had a good experience out there.
The people that I learned from, which have made me grow professionally.
Yeah.
The relationship that Em and I has grown personally because of that. Because we had to. I mean, it was just us.
Yeah.
Those
are the greatest times a lot of the time.
Yeah, you're 23 years old with a daughter, and
no money,
with nobody, and you're completely dependent on each other.
Yeah.
And there's people doing that everywhere. It's not like we're the only ones doing that, but it's.
Yeah.
Gives you a perspective that I can really truly trust this person and count on them to.
You appreciate things.
Yeah.
Later on.
Yeah.
Lisa and I have always said that, like anytime, because when we went to school, no money, just her and I.
Yep.
It's like you do what you got to do.
You figure it out. Yeah.
And figure it out. And you really appreciate the finer things in life.
Yep.
As opposed when everything's just handed to you. And,
the things that your parents went through to provide for you as you're like, man, I have to do this now. Okay, I get why you were upset when I did this.
Yeah, and then you have a kid that you're keeping alive.
Trying.
As well.
That's a full-time job sometimes.
Yeah. So, and that brings us back to, hunting as well. Those hunts that you hunt, that you work hard for, have a totally different meaning.
They really do. When you...
Did you do? Now you like to fish.
Yep.
You're a big fly fisherman.
Yeah.
That was something. Like I think when I met you, were you an avid fly fisherman then?
Not at the time.
Then you matriculated into a pretty serious.
Yeah. So I mean, like growing up here, it's a lot of like native trout. You can't get that. I mean, you can't really get that anywhere else.
No, and I've talked about that a lot. Maine. I took it for granted.
I took it for granted too, right? Why?
You can go anywhere.
You have no idea what everybody else has.
That's it.
Right? So you don't have, but the fish are not really all that picky for the most part. There are a lot of these ponds that maybe see a handful of fishermen a year, right? So you can fish dries, pick a pattern. It doesn't really matter. And Paul, I remember going and I started fishing in Rapid, and I was like, yeah, I fly fish. I know exactly, what I'm doing.
Different beast.
Could not catch a fish to save my life. And they have a really cool fly shop out there. I bought some flies from them. I was like, I need help, right?
Out South Dakota?
Yeah. And I was too poor, too stubborn. I couldn't get like a guided trip to learn the ropes and whatever. So, they showed me that, I got indicators. They gave me nymphs. I never used nymphs because you don't use nymphs in northern Maine. You don't need to do that. And, you're fishing clear water out there that run off from reservoirs and stuff. And I just remember I found this spot. I just mapped it. It was a nice little bank site. You can see the fish in the water. There's 10, 12 feet of water. And the first fish I ever caught out there was on a, pink squirrel, which is it's a midge with a little pink hot spot.
Yeah.
And I just casted it. I didn't even feel the take, didn't take my indicator or anything. And I just, lifted up to recast and I got a fish.
There's a fish on.
Yeah. And there's a nice, nice brown, the first brown I ever caught. And from there, it just kind of progressed. And I met Aaron. He was a more dedicated fisherman than I was. So he helped me out, learning and some of that. And by the end of the year, there's this one section of river that's really fished hard. It's really clear. There's big fish, as those areas get pressure, right?
Yeah.
And I started to figure it out doing that, because you could see the fish. You could see how they respond to certain flies.
Yep.
You could learn that there are certain times when they're feeding, certain times when they're not feeding, and kind of things like that. So my highlight there, and kind of when I feel like, man, I'm really figuring this out, was there's a spot I wanted to fish, and there's a guy that's fishing there. I gave him his space. I fish around. Of course, I don't catch anything, but I know where he's at. There's fish.
Yeah.
And he fishes there for 30 minutes, an hour, and he doesn't catch anything. So I show up there. I see the fish. I'm like, all right, I think they're feeding on this. Tie something on. First cast, I end up hooking into this, mid-20s, lower God. 20s, not mid-20s, lower, 20s rainbow. And, this guy's driving out on the bridge.
He's watching you?
He's watching me.
Oh.
I was like, sorry, dude. But
a little bit of a,
and it's not every day is like that. Some days I'm going to be the guy on the bridge. It's just kind of the way it is. But that day was like, okay, I can figure these things out.
You feel good in those days.
Yeah. And then it gives you, you just branch out and then you try new stuff because you've learned a technique. And
yeah, Maine's different that way, or northern Maine, I should say.
Yeah.
There's no, I very seldom ever have to change a fly.
Yeah, no.
It's the fish they're not fished over very much.
No.
And they're not picky. Unless there's a really particular hatch going off. I know there's a trico hatch along the river.
Yeah.
They can get pretty picky on something like that. But
yeah.
Yeah, for the most part.
You've told me a little bit about your experiences on that roostook. I've never gone
it's
after,
good.
After
yeah. It has some good fish in it.
Yeah.
And not hard to.
I mean, it's right there.
Really hard to catch.
Yeah.
They can be a lot of good caddisfly hatches.
Yeah.
On the river, but yeah, man, out west, like Henry's Fork, some of those big popular rivers.
I've floated them. It's not the same beast, Paul. There's so many fish in that river, those rivers, and there's so many bugs.
Yeah. Well, and people.
There's so many people.
Like it's almost shoulder to shoulder.
There's a lot of people, but doesn't matter.
No
the
kidding.
fishery it's a lot of catch and release. Not a lot of people are keeping fish there, but I mean there's so many fish there.
Yeah.
The guides and people who are dedicated fishermen are just ripping through fish to get the fish.
No kidding.
They're going for that upper 20s, 30-inch brown rainbow in some of these areas. I mean, it's not the same.
You make a point there earlier. You're talking about, you at the time you said you couldn't afford a guide or whatever and it's all that stuff. The education costs money.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say money in particular. It costs something. Whether it's you hire a guide, it's going to cost out of your pocket, or time and mistakes. You end up learning
flies,
one way
line.
You end up learning through some expense.
Yeah. And eventually you figure out, the hardest, I've always said the hardest animal to kill, the hardest fish to catch is the first one.
Yeah.
Then that something that you've done is working. And then you can, if you
build
have a day,
off of that.
Yeah. You want to try something different, that's fine, but this works.
Yeah.
You can always go back to it. And it's like your secret weapon that you can go to. So.
Yeah. So let's talk about your biggest Maine buck.
Yeah.
You came up to camp with us that year.
Yep.
And deer hunted.
Yeah.
And you ruined the hunt by shooting a
I wasn't passing on that guy.
I know, but that was a beautiful buck.
It was a good deer. Yeah, we had that deer on camera for years.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
I mean, I never had him aged, but I'm confident he was at least 6.5 at the time. Yeah, he was a short deer, but the area I hunt, this is obviously down south where I'm at. It's a good chunk of land, but they don't hang on it all that much.
Okay.
You kind of have to there's does that hang around, and then there's some decent bucks. You know, I mean, I've really learned the property as the years have gone, and those deer don't hang out on that. So you're really dependent on a buck chasing or, you know, something like that. So on this morning, you know, I just set up, there's a pinch point, which is our areas I try to focus in on the rut to try to bring that activity to me instead of trying to find it. And you know, I just walked in, set up, and, you know, not even an hour before light, the, you know, doe comes right according to plan. You know, I have good wind on the trail she's supposed to come out on. And I don't know how. I must have moved, or she picked me out. Yeah. And I just remember sitting there for 15 minutes, you know, just like trying not to move, just holding the rifle, or some rifle hunting this time, right? And just like looking at the corner of my eye to the point that my eyes are starting to like twitch, you know, and got to give him a break, and then just turned just enough to see. She actually spooked out and then kind of wasn't really sure and came back. And as she spooked, I was able to turn. Okay. And when I turned, I could see this other deer walking. And I didn't see it for long, but I saw it long enough that I just saw a flash of a beam. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's a good one. And he stopped with his head behind a tree. And I was like, I'm confident that's a buck. I had one little angle, and that doe was not really having it. And I said, I think this is my chance. Yeah. So I shot, and you know, that they were just on the backside of a knoll, so I couldn't really see, you know, the reaction as he's, you know, taking off. So give it a few minutes, go look. Can't find blood. My cousin was around. He heard the shot, so he came. He helped me look a little bit. Then he had to take off to go to work that morning. So can't find blood. I'm like, man, did I miss? There's no way. I mean, I'm like 100 yards. Yeah. There's no way I missed. But I'm not seeing any blood, and there's nothing like that. And so I'm just grid searching the area. And I was like, man, you know what? I'm just going to start over. And I walk back. And on the walk back, I look down, and there's a drop of blood right in the middle of it.
It can be hard.
Right. And
so hard.
How did I miss that? Yeah. You know what I mean? You can see, but you couldn't tell, like, leaves were stirred up because the deer are using that often.
Plus, if anyone's ever tried to pick up a blood trail in the fall time on leaves, you'd be surprised how many leaves have little red dots on them. It just drives you nuts. But
this one, I mean, it was just this nice brown leaf, you couldn't have missed it. It was just like a calling. And then I picked up that trail, and I was looking at it, and it was a little bit chunky. And I was like, man, I should probably give it a little bit more time. Yeah. And I heard something like 50, 60 yards ahead. And he was, you know, I came up over the edge, and there he was expiring. Yeah. He was, you know, doing his last twitches. Man,
he was a big deer. And what do you weigh?
That was 194.
194.
Yeah.
When in November was it?
Or the first week. It was like November 3 or November.
Okay.
Yeah. It was.
So he was going to be about as big as
he was in his prime there, but it just wasn't a big.
Didn't have the frame for.
Just didn't have the frame for it.
I was looking at the picture this morning, because it looks like a thick deer. Yeah, like I remember his chest and neck.
Yeah, he was.
But you said he was short.
He was short. He wasn't like one of those ridge runner deers that you would expect. Yeah. So,
but a beautiful rack on him.
He was thick. He was a nice deer. He's still there's one other deer I've seen that I would say is bigger than him. Okay. That in that same area I've never been able to find.
And that was, you had it scored?
Yep.
140?
Yeah, 144 and change.
Yeah, so it was
like
mastic.
That. Yeah, I mean, there's bigger deer being shot every year, but that was still one of the bigger deer. Top 3 deer I've ever seen.
Maine deer aren't known for huge racks. You see a lot of big body deer shot, and they're just like a mediocre 8-point rack. Nothing special. And yeah, you shoot 140 or bigger.
Yeah,
that's
a
good.
That's a big deer. It's a big deer anywhere, but I think it's tough to do in Maine.
Yeah. So Riley, this year was kind of a special year for you. Mm-hmm. Your daughter shot her first deer.
That was my focus. Yeah, I usually take a week off from work in November, And I ended up going out west somewhere. And this year I tried to plan it so I could be here for like the Saturdays that she was here, because this last year was our first year and she seemed to enjoy it, the time together. So
how old is she?
She's 12.
12.
She's 12. Yeah. So we finally put the pieces together and we were able to spend more than a couple days out.
Yeah.
This year. And we went youth day, didn't see anything. Went, the next Saturday I didn't see anything. The next Saturday I was out of town. And we come back that Saturday and I looked at the wind. I said, all right, well, we're gonna hunt this area, but we're gonna have to go for a little bit of a walk. Yeah. Right. And she was all right. So we walked, and I wasn't sure how she'd do with that. She did awesome, carried her gun all the way through. We set up, clear the leaves, sit down. And I got her a doe permit. And doe and a fawn come out. And she didn't want to shoot those because she didn't want to shoot a pair. I said, that's fine, let's watch them. So we watched. I said, might be something behind it. Yeah. There wasn't. But an hour later, this guy came out. And I think it's probably the most stressful, 3 minutes of my life.
It's different. It's different for a dad.
It's different, because I'm trying to set her up as much as I can. So I set her up setting so that I could help her hold the gun against the tree. Yeah. So it's just a rock solid rest. And of course, this thing comes to the side where there's no tree, right? So, I see it and I'm like, all right, this is a lone deer, which she was willing to shoot. So I said, Ayla, get your gun and just slowly bring it up. Start looking through the scope and trying to find it and sorting those things out. So as she's doing that, I'm trying to, I'm holding the gun, trying to help her at least balance it. Yeah. And this thing just doesn't really stop. And there's an oak tree, but it's not really in a good spot. Yeah. So I figured he was going to eat some acorns. But he's starting to get out to that window that we have, and our wind is going in that direction. I honestly don't know how he didn't wind us where he was, but it must have just been swirling enough. And he gets to that spot, and I went, meh. He doesn't stop. So I did it again. I did it louder. And this time he reacted. He just bounded back where he came from.
No way.
I'm like, crap, I just messed this up for her, right? And so he stops, bounds, and just looks back. And
that never happens.
Never happens, right? I did it kind of loud, probably in my excitement.
Yeah.
I don't know if he heard the first one and didn't react, and then the second one was, but he stopped there. I could still see him, and I said, let's just wait and see what he does. Keep your gun in the area. And so he ends up walking back, and finally he moves into the one spot that we had, just this perfect. Yeah. So as he's walking there, I said, he's going to go, Ayla, get up on that, set yourself up. I start holding the gun, and we're right on the tree. I said, you see him? She says, yep, I see him. And he walks right in that area, and I go, meh. And this time he stops on a dime, just like it's supposed to be, right? And I'm holding it, and she's, can I shoot? Yeah, shoot, right? So she takes aim and shoots and hits it, and it just pretty much just dropped right there and kind of took off. And so we went up, and he wasn't too far from there.
Jeez.
And it's a story of Ayla's first deer.
How big was he?
He was a spike that actually busted off one side. Okay. So I'd like to joke she did something I never did and shoot a one-pointer.
Shot a one-pointer. Jeez,
it's a good first deer, but he was 136 pounds, I think.
No kidding.
Something like that. He was a big spike for down in that area.
Yeah, that's a big deer.
Compared to this is the same area I shot that bigger buck who was 194.
That's big for a spike horn.
Big.
I figure a year and a half old.
Yeah, I was like, what's up with this deer? Is it like me? I'm usually pretty good at generalizing weights, and I was like, I got my expanded bucks from last year, which is I shot 2 out of the same tree 8 days apart.
Was that last year?
That was last year. Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. So I think so Riley's always the person, he's usually the first person I know that shoots a deer every year. Literally. I'll be leaving work one day or something, and I'll get a picture. Like, oh yeah, Riley's already tagged one deer. You usually shoot multiple deer.
I've been fortunate a couple of years. I mean, because I can shoot an extra buck and expand it. Yep. That's been handy.
So you said last year
I shot 2. Yeah. And one thing I kind of like about expanded is that when November comes around, the pressure in that drops pretty drastically.
Does it really?
Because everybody's out rifle hunting their spots.
Okay.
But the flip side to it, and I try not to tell a lot of people this, you can shoot as many does as you want in expanded areas. I
just keep buying tags.
You can just keep buying tags. They're $12 a pop, right? It's great if you want to get some meat for the freezer. And a lot of people take advantage of that. I don't, because I like having does in the area. That I don't really want to pick them out, but I'm not shooing on anybody who does.
Yeah.
But it really brings the rut out because there's less does.
Okay.
So it brings the competition up.
Yep.
So November in those areas, if you find areas that they're traveling, it could be pretty good if you get in the right area.
No kidding.
Couple areas I hunt, I'll walk and I'll just try to find scrape sign, and I mean, you wouldn't believe the scrapes that I can see in some of these areas versus my statewide areas, which have more does and less competition for that. So, but yeah, this is one area that I found a couple years back. Just kind of going on a rogue trip, just exploring, and I come up to this area and there's nothing there. There's a couple of oak trees and there's not a whole lot. And there was like, probably in the size of the room that we're in right now, there's like 10 scrapes.
No kidding.
And there's rubs, on trails.
Like,
and I was like, oh man, this is the spot, right?
Yeah.
So I put a camera up and I was like, well, let's see. And that winter, this is after the season's done, I get deer passing through. So obviously I know they're using these things, these areas. So I set up and I put a camera earlier in the year. I check it out. I've got nothing in September. I've got nothing in October. I'm like, what's up with that?
No kidding.
And then November starts to roll around, and then they start funneling through. And it has a lot of evergreen trees, and I think they like it for the cover that it provides. Okay. And I don't know, there's deer that are pass through it. You'll see them. They eat the oaks and the acorns that are in that area. But it just it picked up
in November.
And I was getting bucks in daylight.
Oh my God!
Every single day.
Yeah.
Right. And so I set up one morning. I got to hit this spot, right? So I finally get an opening and I go set up, and it's pretty cool that morning. It was no snow, and then it started snowing as I was there, and it was cold. I mean, it was 25 degrees, snowing, and there's a slight breeze. And I mean, I'm like every so often I have to wipe the snow off my bow. I've always wanted to shoot a deer in the snow, right?
With the bow?
With my bow, and I've never been able to do it. And I was like, man, maybe this is the day, right? And it's like 8:39. I've had just about all that I can take, and this buck comes out from behind me, and not in all the trail that I'm expecting him to come through. And I'm kind of caught with my pants down. He's like directly behind me. And of course, this is where I think the saddle really, shone, whatever the correct word for that is. But so he's behind me. So I grab my bow really slowly, and I'm just looking, but I'm just moving, putting pressure against the platform and moving. And I eventually get to the point that I'm, I got one knee up against the tree, one on the platform, kind of just pushing myself away, and then I can turn my body enough.
So I got to perceive this. So. Yeah, with a typical stand, it would have been in front of you.
It would have been in front of me, but I wouldn't have had the stand set up in that direction.
Okay.
Right.
So in this case, you get the tree facing you, and the deer's
like
on your backside. Okay.
Directly at 6 o'clock for me. And so I have to flip around. So he ends up walking behind me, and as he's walking, I'm, scrambling to get in position, but I mean, there's no tree, there's no leaves, there's no cover, so you have to pick your spots. And he walks into my final opening, and he's moving away fast, and I just have to hurry up. I didn't put a great shot on that deer. I think in all the commotion, he ended up walking a little bit farther than I thought he was. Okay. So I think my arrow hit a little bit low.
All right.
At 30 yards instead of 20 yards, but he didn't go too far, and I found him.
How big was that deer?
That was 180, I think.
Was that a 10-pointer?
That was an 8-point.
8-pointer.
A small basket rack, but he had thick beams. Okay. I was surprised at how big he was.
180 pounds.
That was in the middle of November. I thought that was a respectable deer. So that was my buck, for the year. So I tagged it, I think, on my state. I don't even remember which one I did. I usually I think I tagged it on my statewide tag. Because expanded gives me 2 extra weeks at the end of the year. I don't muzzle load hunt, so that season doesn't mean anything to me. And so get that deer out of there. This was last year. So I had to work my work week. So I worked the week.
Yeah.
And I'm getting pictures of deer still, as I'm at work, I'm like, man, this place is still blowing up. So I was like, well, I'm taking Ayla this year, right? This was last year. I said, let's go. Ayla is sick the last week of the season. Geez. She's got this bad cough. She doesn't feel good, so she doesn't want to go. So it's Thanksgiving morning. I'm off. It's 15 degrees out, and there's 0 wind. And I was like, I'm going hunting. I'm going right back. And it takes me about 45 minutes to walk into this spot. And it's brutal.
No kidding.
You're going down. It's awful, right? And I don't have any pegs, like the lighted.
Yep.
I don't have anything. You know what I mean? It's all based on memory.
Yep.
And sometimes my memory fails me going through that. So
all of us.
you have to kind of improvise from there. But of course I have, like my phone and my GPS. So I get there. So I get there. It's a swampy area too. So there's some spots that I have to post hole through ice to, 100 yards of Paul. I don't know how there's any deer that didn't. They had to have heard me. They just had to have not cared.
Yeah.
I set up, get in position, and this buck, I couldn't actually see him. I know it was a buck because he eventually made a scrape. And I mean, he's ripping up stuff 50 yards from me. I just can't see him through the trees. He walks away, and I don't know if it's the same deer or whatever, but about an hour later, another buck came. And again, this buck came out. This is, I since learned this area that they don't use this trail until the rut. Yep. And it's actually a trail I walk in on. Okay. I'm surprised that they didn't smell me coming in, but he comes right in on the trail behind me. And again, I'm in the saddle with the deer 25 yards from me at 6 o'clock. And so I have to swing. And it was so quiet that morning, Paul, that as I swung my bow, the tip of my broadhead nicked the twig. Just the slightest. And he stopped and he heard that. And I was like, man, but I worked around those branches, but my saddle and that setup did not make a single.
Nice and quiet.
Yeah, if it did a creak or any bit of noise, that hunt is over.
Yeah.
And I had a little basketball-sized area to shoot through, not at all an area I'm expecting a deer to come. So I'm improvising at this time, and he just walked through, and I probably the best shot I've put on a deer.
No
Heart
kidding.
shot him, and it's cool. You could hear him. You could hear him running through the tree. Because you can hear everything that morning.
Yeah, when it's
running, and then down some. I was like, that's such a great feeling to know you put a good shot on something. It's not suffering. You're done. So get out.
How big was that deer?
A 167.
Yeah,
that was a 167. He was an 8-point. He seemed like a younger deer than the first deer that I shot, but he had he busted a rack.
No kidding.
On that side. So, and that was, I actually had him on camera a couple weeks before, and he didn't have that. So,
so you shot a couple deer this year in Maine.
I shot one deer.
No, okay.
I shot one. Yeah.
Was it the doe?
No. I shot a yearling buck this year.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a couple jobs I work at were short, so I wasn't.
You only shot one deer this year?
I shot the one in South Dakota too, but that doesn't count. But
one Maine deer.
I actually had a rough time finding deer. I saw 2 antlered deer all year this year, and they're both in my freezer.
I think a lot of people that shoot deer on a regular basis didn't this year. I don't know what
there was a lot of feed back down. There was acorns everywhere.
Yeah.
The apple trees there was just a lot of feed. So I don't think the deer were moving all that far.
Yeah. And I know the harvest is down this year. We were talking on the last one there. Maine's harvest was like 38,000 and some change.
Yeah.
It was down 12.7% anyway from last year.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think that 40,000 number was a sustainable objective for us.
No. Conditions play a big role too.
Yeah.
Like up here, we had no snow. First week we had snow, and I remember a lot of people were shooting deer.
It's when you capitalized, yeah.
And then it was all of a sudden, second and third week, like no one was seeing anything.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it's like, geez, what the heck? But yeah, you look at zones 23 and 17, they always shoot a lot of deer.
Yeah, 23 is not far from me.
I think they were like 4,000.
Yeah,
some change.
Yeah. It's hard to find land to hunt down there. If people have land, it's usually to hunt.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I forgot. When you're out west, is it all public land you're hunting?
I do all public.
Is there a lot of public land available to hunt?
It depends on where you go. There's a definite correlation between how easy it is to find land and how easy it is to get the tag, versus how many other people you're going to be, hunting against, which is where for me bow hunting comes in handy because there's usually less people to go up against.
Bow hunting.
Yeah. And you get a different season. You get, you can sometimes get better areas, if depending on the state and how the tags, some are, you get a tag and you can use whatever you want in whatever season. And there's some that are dedicated archery tags.
Okay.
And so you can sometimes get, just because the odds are a little bit lower. So
yeah, I'm used to northern Maine where I don't see anybody.
Yeah.
And I get this, like, if I see one person, I'm like, oh, I'm out of here. I'm not.
Yeah. I think that's how most people are, but it's
deal with it out there.
Every place, every hunt, where you go, there's some challenge, and it's not the same here as it is there.
Yeah.
We hunt different places in Maine, and your challenges are much different than mine.
Yeah.
It's just deer is different than moose. I know you're not a fan of moose hunting because it's not hard enough.
Do you like moose hunting?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly.
I don't know. It's just different. I feel like I don't know. Like I'm. People are gonna probably hang me for this, but I'm not a huge fan of moose meat, and that's probably one reason. But I feel like you pull the trigger, boom, it's over, and the work starts.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, you can make it what it is.
You can. You're right.
Like
it's getting harder.
It's definitely getting harder.
It's not like it used to be.
But you'd be surprised. Of course, I'm not a guide. I don't spend my time in the moose woods, but I think you get a couple hundred yards off the road, and it's like a whole other environment. And just not a lot of people are willing to do that at this point in time.
And that's the people that are successful now. They're calling and doing all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can people shoot bulls from the roads and shoot nice bulls from the roads, but when I get my tag, that's not what I'm going to be doing.
Back years ago, I remember when I was a kid, man, they'd be discouraged if they're moose week. They didn't have a moose down by Wednesday.
Yeah.
They were calling it quits. They were like,
it
was basically money like the first day.
Yeah. I mean, 95% success of those years.
It's not like that now.
So, yeah.
But, well, Riley, I appreciate you finally stopping by.
Yeah. I'm sorry it took so long, but it's nice to.
Everyone's busy. Kids, I mean, hey, it's hard to...
Nice to talk shop and see you again, though, Paul.
It is. Home for Christmas. But yeah, and you'll have to come back. We'll do it again when Dad's here. Like I said, Dad was super bummed.
Yeah. I'll see you guys soon enough.
Yeah, you come back up.
Yeah.
Maybe go to camp sometime.
Maybe...
stuff.
I thought about it this year. I was like, man, but then we had Thanksgiving in our house. I was like, I can't...
Anytime.
I can't
open invitation.
North, I appreciate it. I will take you up on it some year. But
so my phone's going off like crazy. So another couple months, we'll have you back on. Tell some more stories.
Hopefully I have some more.
Oh, you will. So, all right. Hope you enjoyed it. I guess till next time, get outside. Riley doesn't know the end of it. It's good for the soul. See ya.
It's good for the soul.